Okay, Sunday, August 24th, 2025. Today is a Ukrainian holiday. I didn't know that. It's a flag day or something like that. So the gym wasn't open, so I'll just go home and use my Nordic Track ski machine. So I don't know, talk about various things today. So yeah, there was a rocket attack, I think last week. I think a little bit over a week ago or earlier this week. I can't remember. They come and go. I heard the sounds and everything. I mean, I heard like two actual rockets, and then I heard like 4 or 5 explosions. And at first I thought it was like as usual, a thunderstorm. I'm, still very hard to tell, to be honest with you. It's not like a kaboom kaboom. It's more like a crushing sound, like that you hear. And it very well could be like a storm. It's not this dramatic sound. I guess we were far away. We were 6 kilometers. There was some that landed here in Lviv. Most of those attacks were aimed at an American factory in a city called Mukachevo. It's some small town in western Ukraine. I've actually been there. And they got like a big manor house or a castle there. I don't know what you want to call it. I wouldn't say it's a castle proper. It was more like a palace. A castle's like something with like big walls and a moat and a drawbridge. And a palace is just some giant house where some nobleman or rich person lived. Right, I guess it is a castle. Actually, now I remember. Yeah, they had a drawbridge. It is actually a proper castle there. And yeah, the factory made like coffee machines and toasters and lots of other military supplies, right? But I think this message was more the Russians were like telling the Americans to keep out of Ukraine. And these negotiations are really frustrating, but this is what you got to expect when you're trying to deal with the Russians, and they say one thing and then do another. Because it sounded like, that it was going to be okay to put foreign soldiers here in Ukraine and get this Korea thing going. That we just, like I said, the concession of land is still up for debate. And I would only take that deal, like I said, if there was like a really hard truce that, okay, this is all, we get to build a wall, a DMZ, we get to have foreign soldiers here, close the skies, and it just becomes like East Germany, West Germany, an Iron Curtain, North Korea, South Korea type of thing. But apparently the Russians want to be part of that security force. So I guess they will give a security guarantee to Ukraine as long as they are, Ukraine is in Russia's orbit. But so where is this all going, right? It's just we're right back where we started. Unless, the leadership has to come from Europe. They're going to be the ones having to step in and send the soldiers here and close the skies and just ignore what Putin says. And like I was saying, they ought to just, rent their pilots to Ukraine or something, put Ukrainian markings on the plane, and then just allow those pilots to take a leave of absence and, be contractors for the Ukrainian military. And then legally, there wouldn't be any foreign soldiers here, just would be contractors or whatever. But they could find a way to skirt the rules, so at least on paper, everything looks good and the Russians can't really complain. You can't really stop a guy from coming to Ukraine and moving here and wanting to join the army. Right now, if they get captured, they'll be treated like a mercenary. That's a very high risk versus getting Geneva Convention. But anyway, if you're a native Ukrainian captured by the Russians, you're not going to get Geneva Convention. I was watching a documentary on Ukrainian prison, and it looked like a college dormitory. The guys had actually looked like they were on a Navy ship. They had blue uniforms, blue baseball hats. They had like a room full of bunks. They had a kitchen. They were getting 3 meals a day, getting to exercise. they all looked well fed, well taken care of, and that prison was following the Geneva Convention quite to the letter, right? Because there's probably a lot of foreign observers, but in Russia that's not the case. In Russia it's like the Russian convention or the Moscow convention, where you get starved to death, you get the shit beat out of you, and lucky to probably, the people are wondering like, why didn't they take their own life on the battlefield? But they do get prisoner swaps and the people come home, but they're not the same people that left. So, but yeah, that's how it works. So, I honestly don't think like a lot of people here are angry at Trump, but they should be just equally as angry at Biden, because it's really, everything is just the same, right? Whether it's Trump or Biden, Trump is just trying a different approach, that let's recognize the reality and try to make a deal on what's left. Because, and I feel this way, Putin does not have a reason to stop. India just actually doubled down on backing Russia when the U.S. told them not to. Like I tell people, Modi is the most powerful man in the world, Narendra Modi of India, because where India decides to, apply its neutrality or unapply its neutrality, that can shift the balance. So, the math is really, like I said, the math is really not good. So Russia has a $2 trillion economy, and the last statistic I saw is 40% of it is devoted to the war. Probably the rest is to pensions and infrastructure or whatever else. So that 40% of $2 trillion is $800 billion. And the U.S. total defense budget for the U.S. is around that much. Maybe they were upping it to $1 trillion. I'm not sure if that passed in the big beautiful bill or not. I'm not sure what, but it's, anyway, so that's the total budget for the U.S. And then the total budget for Europe is probably like a quarter of that. They're trying to get Europe to spend more. And Europe has to do a lot of catch up on their own stock. So let's say there's like $1 trillion between the US and Europe. They can at best give 10% of that to Ukraine, maybe 15%. So just from a spending point of view, it's, and then the manpower, right? The Russians have like a 6-to-1 manpower advantage. Granted, they're not fighting smart. If they fought a little bit smart and wisened up, it would be a lot worse than what it is now. But so it's not a good situation, and that's what Trump recognizes. Let's just get it stopped and get some walls built and get some lines drawn, and then the West has to rearm itself. Now, if Trump was really with Russia, he wouldn't be telling NATO to spend its money on weapons. He would be doing the opposite. He would tell them to spend more money on gay crosswalks and social programs, and raise the pensions and tell everyone to take longer vacations and disarm, That's what he would be doing. But when you're telling your allies to take some responsibility and own the situation a little bit more, I think that's pretty pro-Ukrainian. And as Marco Rubio said, Russia is the one getting the sanctions, and Ukraine is the one getting the military and intelligence support. We're not sanctioning Ukraine. We're not trying to isolate Ukraine. We're trying to isolate Russia. We're sending weapons to Ukraine, intelligence even almost as valuable as the weapons itself, to have the information to know where to apply the force. Because like I said, if you do I think in the last video we said, if you just hit the nodes, where there's like huge groupings of soldiers, groupings of ammunition, there's a command center, and you hit these things, then you don't have to fight 1-to-1, right? You're just fighting smart. You're just taking out things at the center, at like the crossroads, and then you don't have to fight every one of them. You just keep screwing them up from the back, and then the supply chain, breaks down, or the command structure breaks down, and then they just start surrendering and go to one of these like, 5-star prisons here in Ukraine. So, yeah, it's yeah, I think that's where it has to go. The Europeans have to just do it. Just close the skies. That would be the first thing to do. You know, get those air defense systems in here. And it's not just Patriot. You know, the issue with the Patriot missile, like we were saying, is they're making more Rolls Royces every year than they're making Patriot batteries. It's the production is very low, so they have to bring all these like you know, Rheinmetall smart guns. You know, the Rheinmetall company in Germany makes these anti-aircraft guns that have programmable ammunition. And then again, it's just smartly using resources. They can, instead of firing 100 rounds blindly hoping to hit a drone, they can fire like 2 or 3 and hit the drones. And then, you know, the hypersonic and the other missiles, I mean, that's a tough one. I guess there are some, they'll have to just develop new systems, or, you know, find out where those things are sitting in Russia and blow them up in Russia, and then give credit to the Chechens or give credit to what other group is upset with the national government, so the Russians start fighting with each other. You know, that's really the only hope, you know, is to start a civil war in Russia. But yeah, so that's where it's going. I mean, I like, people are all, like I said, people are mad at Trump or whatever, you know, for doing the things he's doing, but you know, you have to look at the big picture. He just wants to get the war to stop, because if it keeps going on, you know, Ukraine is not winning. This is like I said, this Ukrainian propaganda. There's no winning here for Ukraine. Ukraine is like surviving. You know, winning is like they get everything back, but it's definitely, there's no winning here. So they have to make it hard for the Russians to keep advancing, like they did with the North Koreans, just to get them to a point where they don't want to invest any more into this, and they want to just stop. And you know, but their economy is not in trouble. I was watching some YouTubes about that, and their economy is quite okay. I mean, they have, like, Moscow is getting a lot of Middle Eastern tourists, a lot of Chinese tourists. You know, the Russians are going to North Korea for vacation now. So the sanctions don't work, and they're you know, they're realigning, you know, to this new reality, and they people don't seem to mind. You know, I mean, I'm sure there's some people that mind, but if they want to get out bad enough, I guess they can get to Dubai or move to India or something like that and get a new passport, or, you know, I don't know, whatever country where they can get a, you know, middle country that they can get some passport somewhere in South America and then migrate to Europe eventually. You know, I don't know, but it's not enough. You know, and it's not enough that people are, you know, burning stuff in the streets and burning down, you know, I mean, I'm sure there's stuff going on there, but nothing that'll change anything. So we can only hope, like I say, the big hope is that the Europeans can actually take the ownership on this, because it's a lot to ask the U.S. You know, I mean, this is what people voted for, and it is Europe's, this is Europe's sphere of influence, and Europe has to really do something to get out of this decline they're in, and this, you know, they're becoming highly irrelevant. I mean, there's really, like I said, after we had that 6 months in Belgium, it's Europe is really on a downward spiral, and it's accelerating. I mean, their whole priorities and everything are wrong. But yeah, anyway, that's all I got. We'll see you later. Bye.